Well, what is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to A Therapeutic Edge. Hope you guys are having a great day. I have got something, well, just sort of interesting on the table. This is the Benchmade 496 Vector. Not to, wow, I rocked the whole table there, didn't I? Not to be confused with the 495 Vector. This is just an interesting knife. So the 465 Vector has a standard sort of almost spear point, sort of drop point blade, G10 handles. This thing, on the other hand, has aluminum bolsters, G10 scales, right, open construction, and a really interesting compound grind on the blade. Look at that. Now, it isn't maybe my favorite knife of all time. I do want to point out, these come in OD green. I don't like OD green, so I fixed it and made it more my own. It does come with a very nice Benchmade deep carry pocket clip of a design they don't use a lot, so that's fun. It has a lanyard space, as you can see, and very, very comfortable grip in hand. So as you're watching this, know that if you go look for one of these, and they are still out there, you're going to find them in green. If you want one in black, you can always do what I did, which is use synthetic grit dye and make it your own. So what do you get? Well, again, you get a really interesting looking knife. Oh, and I do want to point out before we go any further, this is an assisted access lock. So it's got a really nice low profile flipper right here. Give it a little flip and it just pops right out. The action on this thing is really good for an assisted knife. I know assisted knives are not for everyone, but every once in a while one comes along that is so interesting looking that I go for it, and I'm glad I did. Now, again, there are things on this knife that people are not going to enjoy. We'll start with the fact that, as I mentioned, it is assisted. Beyond that, it has a recurve, which a lot of people don't like. I don't mind. I have a rod sharpening system, and so dealing with a little bit of recurve is just not a big deal to me. But I can understand how some people don't like it if they use flat stones or a flat sharpening system, but I don't have that problem. I think the overall look of the knife is really cool. I wish that it was a little less swoopy. I think that that would give it a little more, if it was a little taller up here and the belly at the front was a little longer, I think it would give it a little more of an aggressive posture. But as a work knife and a user tool, this thing is really very good. Now, do I wish these were titanium? Sure, but then it would be a very, very expensive knife, and aluminum is cool, it's lightweight. Although this is not a particularly lightweight knife. So having said all that, what do I feel about it? Well, I like it. I like it enough that I dyed the scales out and made it my own. Even though it's assisted, you can operate it one-handed, no problem. And again, this really low-profile flipper tab means that it's a great carry. It does have a lock. I'm not a huge fan of extra locks on knives, but in this case, you can lock it open. And you can lock it closed. And with an assisted knife in your pocket, that means it's not going to fire when you don't want it to. It's not a bad feature. Let's go ahead and unlock that and pop it open again. Take a look at what you get from it, overall. Oh, and it is CPM 20CV, which is a really nice touch. Not a lot of that in the Benchmade world, so interesting, super interesting grind on CPM 20CV. So let's take a look at what you get. We line that up. You get 3.5 inches of cutting on little over 3.5 inches of overall blade length. The overall knife itself is almost 8.5, right? So it's a full-size knife. Grip area from behind that little flipper tab is really, really generous. You're at you're a little over 3.5 to this first bump right here, but all the way out to the end, you're over 4 inches. So even in my hands, right, there is knife sticking out the back. It's reasonably lean, my goodness. Overall, it's just a great knife. It's a little more expensive than the 495, which I understand kind of steers people away. And of course, it has some personality quirks that might not be for everybody. But as a collector, stuff like this makes me really happy. Let's do some size comparisons, just for funsies. We'll get that lined up as best we can. There we go. Let's see. How about a PM2, which is a relatively big knife. As you can see, the 496 Vector here is longer than a full-size PM2, which of course means it's going to be bigger than everything else. Here it is against the full-size Griptilian, Another Benchmade brought to the party. Let's line that blade up there so you get a better, there we go. Right, as you can see, you get a lot more cutting and a little more handle. The Vector is just a big knife. I like that. And finally, our dear old small knife, or as my wife would say, medium knife measuring tool, the Bug Out. And as you can see, the Vector is just a whole lot more knife in many ways. It's good. It's good. It is. It's really good. And looking at it, I understand why it didn't get the attention that maybe it should have. The knife community is diverse as hell. Everybody likes different stuff. But there are some things that people just kind of shy away from. Assisted, recurve, you know. But there is a community for that within the community. I'm one of them. Lots of people like this stuff. It's not inexpensive. Coming in well over $200. You know, that may have also steered some people away from it. But I'm telling you, if you're interested in unique grinds as just part of your collection, this is a great knife. The recurve is nice because when you're cutting media, cardboard, which is the most common, of course, and there's nothing in the cutting path at all, right? It allows you to sort of keep the material centered, you know, on the blade right here. So as you're pushing through, even if you're rocking a little bit, it gives you a swoop to hold it in place. The tip of this thing is very robust, right? It's very thin behind the edge here in this grind, right? Which is just a little hollow, which is very nice. But up here at the tip where it swells, so if you need to do, you know, this kind of a cut, or even just a push, right? Like any sort of stabbing cut, you're not going to worry about screwing up the front end of this knife because it's got a ton of extra material up here. It's still very, very sharp, right from the factory, but it's very strong, which is very cool as far as I'm concerned. I didn't love this knife until I dyed the scales, right? You guys know I've got a thing for black, gray, and silver knives, right? I do have knives in other colors. I mean, sitting here in front of me, I can see 3 red ones and one that's neon green and one that's brown. But for the most part, my knives tend to be gray or black or silver. It makes me happy. That's what I do in my collection. When this thing showed up in OD green, I thought I could live with it. But I kind of couldn't. It just bugged me. Having seen it now, all dressed in black, it makes me wonder why they didn't offer it this way in the first place. I mean, come on now. I think it looks really good. Let's go ahead and weigh it out. I said it's not an ultralight knife, and I wasn't kidding, but I'm not sure what it weighs because I've never done this, so we'll do it together. And of course is our scale of goodness. Let's see where the Vector comes in at. We don't want grams, we want ounces. 4.5 ounces for a just about 3 3/4 inch blade. Not too bad, right? Because it has steel liners on the inside of the G10 and even on, you know, following up on the inside of these aluminum bolsters, it does have kind of dual materials all the way down, and it's got the spring mechanism, and it's big, right? So there's a cumulative thing going on there for weight, I think. But 4.5, not bad. That comes in at 127 grams. It is completely and elegantly pocketable, primarily because of the shape, right? It really, for a large-sized knife, because of this sort of teardrop shape, oh, there's a hair, and the fact that it only eats up, what are we looking at? Even at its widest spot, we're looking at under 1.5 inches, so 1 1.33 inches. It sits in the pocket really well. It's become sort of a favorite of mine when I need something sort of low-key, but I want something interesting to carry. And it's, again, ridiculously comfortable in hand. They did a fantastic job. It's got a great swedge across the top here, right? As you can see, the blade thins out and then gets thicker again up towards the tip. The only thing for me is my thumb's a little longer than I have big hands. So this is a nice flat spot for your thumb to land right here if you hold it this way. But if I come forward, I'm pressing down on this thinned out swedge, which means if I was going to do a lot of work that involved me, like, I don't know, maybe feather sticking wood, which you might do, that could be a little bit of a hot spot. The clip does not offer me one at all, which I think is very, very cool. It is a relatively thin slice of CPM 20CV, and let's take a look at that. All right. Oh, yeah. So let's see where we land here. Right here at the thickest spot. Yeah, it's 2.5 millimeters. So it's a thin blade to begin with, ground hollow. So it does come to a very nice edge here. But even up here where it is a little more robust, it's not like it's tank parts. It's still an excellent slicer all the way across. However, because it is so thin, where they've thinned it for the swedge, you know, that's not awesome. But if you hold it back here and use this flat spot, there's no jimping anywhere, actually, on this knife. You know, it allows for pretty good usage that way. So if you were going to work down this way, you could do pretty well. If you were making feather sticks or you had to grind something off. Don't pry with your knives, please. But for cuts along a surface, right, you do have a spot for your thumb. Now, if you come forward with your finger for draw cuts, I mean, your hands are as big as mine, you start to get back up to a place where it swells out again, and you can draw fairly easily. So it's a good user, well made, an interesting design, and I really like it. And I hope you have too. So this is the 496 Benchmade Vector, not to be confused with the 495 Benchmade Vector, which is just a weird choice on their part. But that's the way it is. If you're interested in this knife, a bunch of knife stores have them. I'll post a link down in the description of one or two. And again, remember, when you go to look for it, it's going to be in OD green, right? However, it will be the same knife. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I've enjoyed sharing it with you, and I know I've enjoyed having it in the collection. We'll see you next time.